fire, and man, we're live. All right, everybody, if you've been playing along at home, welcome back to the Talking Average Fitness podcast. As always, I'm here to tell you that a pike is not a hollow, and my name is Sam Burns. And I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and tall person in general, Mr. Kevin McCarthy. Kevin, how are you today, sir?
Doing fantastic. How are you, Mr. Sam?
Wonderful, crushing life. Very happy to be here. And we are both joined by our good friend and also fellow coach and colleague, Miss Cristina Anderson. Cristina, how the hell are you?
I am great. I'm great. The sun is out today. It's March. Spring is here, and I'm excited to connect with both of you.
That is beautiful. I love the idea that spring is here, but where I am, there's still many inches of snow on the ground.
Up in Maine, they're still in the fake. They got faked out. They're a little bit of some, and back to snow.
Yeah, I'm looking at my back deck, and I've got 8 inches of standing snow on my back deck. So,
and in where me and Cristina are, I'd like look at the temperature today. It's like I believe it just cracked 50 degrees here in Sudbury, Massachusetts. There's not a bit of snow on the ground, about 3,000 tons of salt, but not a bit of snow.
God bless New England.
God bless me. Yep.
By the way, 2015. Cristina, were you here in 2015, or had you not moved back yet?
I had not moved here. No.
So we had a massive snowstorm. Kev, do you remember when they shut down the state?
So I wasn't in Massachusetts at the time. I was in Vermont. So like we literally got we still same snowstorm. The Snowmageddon just wrecked. I'm pretty sure everywhere, most kind of like northern New England, but in Vermont, it was almost every day for a while that it was like just another 5 feet of snow.
Yeah.
So that our professors gave up. They were like, guys, come back to school when you can see the road again. And we're here's a bunch of work. Do with it what you will. Come back when you can see the road again. And we were like, aye, Captain.
Right. So we had a year where it was really, really, really bad. And there were 2 full days where the governor shut down the state. He's like, you're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to go to work. It's just not safe. There's that much snowfall. They had to get legislation passed in the state of Massachusetts, in the Boston area, to get permission because they had so much snow and nowhere to put it. They had to get legislation passed to be okay with the fact that they were going to dump a bunch of the snow into the ocean, essentially.
Yep.
Because they had no other place to go with it. And it was a whole an environmental issue because everything that they scrape up off the ground is disgusting, and also sand and salt and dirt.
Yep, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Yay, reminiscing.
Yeah, I do remember that.
That's so interesting.
Although I will say, whenever the weather is gross, I think that should be a mandatory day off. If it's gross outside, doesn't matter how much snow is falling down. If there's a little bit of snow, or even if it's just a dark and dreary day, mandatory day off for everyone. You need to spend a minimum of 6 hours in a horizontal position, and you need to finish at least one movie. Yeah. And mandatory for everyone. It should be a law.
Mm-hmm. Or half a season of some show.
Exactly. Binge watch some show on Netflix. That's mandatory.
Yep. I'm on board.
So for anyone who's watching or listening who doesn't know who you are, Cristina, you have one of my favorite stories to tell in terms of what I say to everybody is this woman will run through a brick wall in pursuit of her coaching and becoming a better coach and becoming a professional coach. So I'd love to get the world record Fran time version of your kind of journey to CrossFit and then to coaching, and then kind of where you are right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I started CrossFit back in 2012, and was actually pretty darn good at it. It was back in the days when I remember one of the open workouts had 100-pound snatch in it. And that was back in the days when no women could snatch 100 pounds. That's not the case anymore. But I was one of the ones, right? I was kind of good at things. And, my coach definitely, enjoyed pushing me forward. I was a pretty gifted athlete. I had a lot of potential. But unfortunately, that relationship became really sour. I had a history of struggling with an eating disorder. My weight had always been a problem my whole life. So I think there was just kind of a disconnect on like how to empathetically deal with that. And it caused me to just crash and burn. And so from that point, I actually took 7 full years off of like any fitness at all whatsoever. And in that time, I gained like 130 or so pounds. Literally did almost nothing, like just did a lot of couch sitting and Ben and Jerry's eating, and but constantly was like still obsessed with CrossFit. Like I would watch CrossFit on YouTube and like I'd be eating my Ben and Jerry's and I'd be like, pick up the bar. Like it just never left me. Even though I was so terrified to go back into a gym. Like it was just like my biggest fear.
Yeah.
And when my first daughter was born in 2017, I think something hit me. A couple things hit me. I had a very traumatic experience with that, which, I mean, we don't need to go into any details, but I ended up having a C-section. And after surgery, the first thing that they do is they're like, okay, we need you to roll up out of bed and stand on this scale. They weigh you. That's like the first thing that they want to do. And Sam, you might have experience with this. I know that your wife went through a similar situation with your first. So, you know, they get me on this scale, and the scale read 390 pounds. And I remember like making the excuse in my head of like, oh, like my body is so swollen right now. I just went through traumatic experience, like, which they explained to me, like there's excess fluid, yada, yada.
That's a real thing.
It's a real thing, right? So this was definitely like an exaggerated version of my weight. However, I had let my weight get to the point where 400 pounds was like in the, you know, foreseeable future. And I think that it was just kind of a wake-up call for me. As soon as I was able to, I reached out to a friend who was a CrossFit coach who, you know, in the meantime of me taking my time off, he had started his own gym. So I reached out to him and I started with personal training twice a week. And then I gradually increased that time. I gradually gained the confidence to become a member at the gym and work out with other people, which was a terrifying thing at that point. And slowly and steadily, I just gained my footing. I took my level 1, with the inkling of like, I could become a coach and I could maybe help people like me. And ever since that weekend, it has been like pedal to the metal, full steam ahead.
Yes.
I was like, this is my life. Like, I just knew it in my level 1. I was like, this is my life. I want to be one of them. I set my goal to hit seminar staff. I didn't even finish the weekend and I was like, I'm going to be on seminar staff. Like I just knew. And so ever since then, I moved to Boston to be closer to, to be closer to Austin Malleolo, who had ran my level 1. So I was like, I'm going to move and like work for that guy and just make that happen. And then I've just like bounced around at different gyms in this area. And now I'm the head coach at a gym, CrossFit Medfield, which Sam used to be a coach here. We're just outside the Boston area here. So, there's a lot of like, I skipped over a lot, but that was my fast version, I guess.
I love that. And you can, if you play that back real slow and you listen to that part where she's like, at my level 1, I'm going to go be a seminar staff member. Like when I met Cristina, I was doing like I had hired Denise Thomas as a kind of mentor, and we were working through some high level coaching development stuff. And I drove into Boston, and you were in the middle of a CDP with Austin and James and Denise. And you had already taken your level 2.
Yes.
And after your level 2, when you went and took your CDP, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first time you started actually coaching classes.
Yes. I took my level 2 before coaching any classes.
Yeah.
This was during the time of COVID. So that was kind of the why, but it was like,
yeah,
I just was like, what can I do to get better? There's no gyms open right now, but like, I'm going to go take my level 2.
Right.
So then I coached as an intern. I was actually working with Kevin at the time as an intern at One Nation Fitness.
Yep.
And I was there for 6 weeks before taking the CDP. So I had 6 weeks of coaching experience when I met you.
That's awesome. So it's like, for those of you who don't know, like if you're a person who does CrossFit and you're not a coach and you're sitting here being like, oh, level 1, level 2. A lot of coaches never go to their level 2, let alone decide to take their level 2 on the heels of their level 1. So when I say that Cristina is an incredibly driven person, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. There's no doubt in my mind in any way, shape, or form that she'll wear a red shirt, because
not a single doubt.
Yeah. Like she's like a Navy SEAL, like failure is not an option.
I mean, when it comes to like, because you had said like, as soon as you took your level 1, it was like, at the end of Saturday, you just put your foot to the gas pedal, like, we're going to fucking get this. We're going to go.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you get your level 3, like within a year of your level 1?
Or it was 17 months. Yeah.
Okay, so not too far. So to put this in frame of reference, right? Like for myself, and I feel like I've had relative, I don't know if like normal is the word, but like a kind of normal, I guess we'll call it, timeline for my coaching.
None of us are normal.
Huh?
I said none of us are normal.
Well, okay. But like my timeline was like not out like absurd when I was like, okay, I got my level 1. I think it was 3 years later, maybe. And after 3 years of coaching, like I'd coached for like kind of the tail end of a year in college and for like basically a year in Maine.
Yep.
And then moved to Massachusetts. And then like after a year and a half, so roughly 3 years after getting my level 1, I then went and got my level 2.
Yeah.
And then after getting my level 2, another 2-ish years, then I got my level 2 in like 2017. And then like 2019 in the summer, I got my level 3.
Yeah.
So over the course of that, you're looking at like a 6 or 7 year journey of development, this gym, get better, get worse, get my level 2, realize I'm not that great, get better again. Oh my gosh. I still like terrifying, talk about terrifying coaching moments. Like there's 2 of them to get my mind. Was one, Austin, the old marshmallow, running my level 2 and just being like, wow, that wasn't great. It's like, cool. And then the second one was actually during Christina's CDP. She was observing one of my classes, and that's the class that Denise shredded me on in the office afterwards. That bare my soul was like, Denise, basically the most terrifying human being, tore me to shreds and called me a Barry's boot camp instructor after that class. So that's a fun little connection for those of you guys that have been following along at home the entire time. It's it's such a small world, this CrossFit space, but I feel like a 7-year span of the kind of development to get your level 3 is, like Sam said, maybe not normal, but like a relatively reasonable timeline. Take that and put all that development into a less than 18-month span. Like that's how driven Cristina is. Like again, to echo Sam's thoughts, there's not a single doubt in my mind that you'll be wearing a red shirt and I'd put you in a red shirt tomorrow if I had the power to do so, but my application's still just chilling in the file cabinet at HQ.
I mean, even I had a compressed kind of timeline.
You did?
Oh yeah. I mean, I started coaching, I got my level 1 end of 2017, started coaching full-time 2018. I got my level 2 end of 2018, and then I got my level 3 early 2021. So even that is compressed.
You guys are so smart. God damn it.
Well, we're really just, crazy egotistical. So all joking aside, I reached out to Cristina because I wanted to have a discussion that is a little bit different than what we normally feature on this podcast. Believe it or not, we as coaches struggle with things. And this is not just, I struggle with getting my athletes to understand the virtues of strict movement versus kipping movement. This is, I have serious existential issues with what I'm taught as a CrossFit coach and what I hear discussed in the outside world. And some of this stuff I can't relate to. I can sympathize, but I can't empathize. And specifically, this very complex and conflicting intersection of ideas around health and weight, and mixed in with that, the athlete themselves as a human being and the emotional component and journey that athletes go through. And I knew when I was sitting down on the couch and I was going over this in my brain, I was like, I can't speak to any of this. I have been, at best, skinny fat my entire life until I actually started doing something. And then my body was like, oh, that's what muscles are. And I trust Cristina to be incredibly honest and open and vulnerable. And that's, one of your great assets. And so I want to lean into the subject a little bit, and, full disclosure, if you're listening to this, it's probably going to be uncomfortable for us, but it's my experience that only through discomfort do we actually grow and learn and change. And that is the spirit with which I'm kind of walking into this. So I have this thing, this kind of, like, every once in a while you get a phrase stuck in your head, right? And I don't know if anyone else is like this, but this happens to me. My brain assembles words in an order and they stick there, and I have to chew on them for a while. And the phrase that's in my head, for better or for worse, and if I'm wrong, I own the fact that I'm wrong, and that's why we're having this discussion, is I think too often we are confusing the concepts of healthy at any size with happy at any size. All right? And I'm coming at this from the perspective of a CrossFit coach. When I say those words, what I mean is a person who CrossFit tries its best to be measurable, observable, and repeatable. It tries its best to be objective. And it's through that lens I approach a statement like healthy at any size, which is a phrase that is bandied about in the world outside of CrossFit. And by that, I mean the larger world, right? It does exist for us as CrossFitters. And when I hear that phrase, my knee-jerk reaction is to argue and say, no but, right? And this is where a complete lack of lived experience in any way, shape, or form makes me have to stop and say, I don't know. And so that's where this thing, that's where the seed of this came from. And so I guess putting the ball entirely in your court, Cristina. So I have this phrase. I think we confuse healthy at any size with happy at any size. When I say those words in that order, right? What are the things that pop into your brain? And like, how does, talk at me, please.
Yeah. I think the first thing that pops in my brain is that I think that we need to adjust our definition of obesity, because I think that, CrossFit is on this, journey to cure the world's most vexing problem, which is chronic disease and, obesity. It's a real thing. Like, it is a real thing and it's a real problem. But my problem with the word obesity is that it is defined by, I believe, a BMI over 40. Maybe
That sounds
that's
about
morbid
right.
obesity. And then I think obesity is a BMI over 30 something. And then morbid obesity is a BMI over 40, I believe.
Yeah. I think so. That sounds about right.
I think actually for men, technically the BMI characteristic is like overweight is over 25, obese is over 30. And then,
might be like over 40. So I think your ballpark, that's about right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the definition. That's it. And so I think that where the phrase healthy at any size comes from is that I sit here in front of you with my BMI is over 40. It is over 40. I have always been a larger than average woman. I am 5'7" tall.
Okay.
I right now weigh right around 250 pounds.
Okay.
It's morbidly obese. However,
by that definition.
Right. Yep.
However, if you were to look at my lifestyle, I do not consider myself obese.
Right.
And I can't. Like, there are people in this world that would be considered a healthy BMI and a healthy weight that are incredibly unhealthy. So I believe that that's where that phrase healthy at any size comes from. Because if you were to take a complete panel of my health,
sure,
while my body fat percentage and my BMI are sickness, if we're talking about the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum,
pathological values.
Yep. Sickness, like bottom of the sickness, like on my deathbed. But every single other marker that you could ever take, my cholesterol is perfect. My blood pressure is in the fitness range. You could argue that some of the practices that I do for my mental health would put me towards the fitness side of the continuum.
Sure.
Which is like debatable that we could, talk about that. But that is my problem with the way that we are defining size, I guess.
Right. It seems then that, and Kevin, I'll say this and then I'll kick it to you because I'd love to get your thoughts as well. Yeah. It seems then that part of the problem is how are we defining health as well? Like if the definition health in this particular case, so like healthy at any size, acknowledges that our previous definition of health is not completely indicative of quote unquote healthy, right? And an arbitrary BMI of X used as a health marker to arbitrarily define healthy or unhealthy, right? It seems, and this is where I felt this was going, but it seems like that's an overly simplistic statement of what is a much larger and more complicated situation, and that is leaving aside the human component, which makes it even more complex, of course. Kevin.
So I was actually going to kind of go or touch on something as you had said, Christina, would like, if you look at the BMI factors, like when I was studying exercise science in school, it wasn't lost amongst the exercise science professors and all the students in there. Like we were even just in class, right? Like BMI is a literal trash representation of where your body is. Because if we look at, if those that know me and have seen me in person know what I look like and my fitness level, I am overweight by BMI standard. I'm 6'1". I'm right around 200 pounds. And I haven't had my body fat taken in a while, but last time it was like just under 12% body fat. It's like that's, but I'm in the overweight category if you look at my BMI, because my body weight versus my height, that equation puts me into like well into the overweight category.
Right.
And so it's not a very accurate representation of that. But also when it comes to the definition of health, and I forget where I've heard this, I believe it's like kind of in the level 1 when they're talking about the fitness, wellness and sickness continuum, where they're like, a definition of health can't just be the absence of disease. Like, hey, well, you're not dead yet, so you must be good.
Right.
You know, so it's like, that's not the case. And as Cristina had pointed out, which I 100% agree with, is like, you have people who might be a little bit on the larger side, but live a really healthy and active lifestyle. They're just somewhere in their journey doing their thing, and whatever changes might happen is completely up to them and you know, aligns with their goals. But everyone's in a different spot in their journey. But their health markers might be brilliant because they live a really healthy lifestyle. Flip to the other side, like, there are some people, if you look at them physically, you'd be like, oh, that person must be the picture of health. And then you like, take a look under the hood, you take some blood measurements and the whole thing, and they can't walk 3 minutes without wheezing, and their blood pressure is through the roof, and they're, you know, pre-diabetic because of the way they eat. But yet, body weight wise, they look fine. You know, the most extreme example of this, I can't remember the dude's name. There was way too many vowels and Z's in there, but he was a bodybuilder back years ago, that physique competitor, right?
Ziz.
Huh?
Ziz.
Is that how you pronounce that? Okay.
It's ZYZZ. Like, yeah.
It's way too many. It's not a word. It's not a name. So like, Ziz was a physique competitor, male physique competitor, that super shredded, jacked, you know, the whole deal. If you looked at him, like, dude looked like he was sculpted like a Greek god type deal. And he died at like 25 or 26 because just his health was trash. And it's like, that's, again, an extreme example, but there's a whole spectrum within there. Right. And so I 100% agree with Cristina that, like, the way that we define health needs to change to like a more objective and multifaceted model than just what's your BMI.
Right. And I don't want to hop on that bandwagon, but, you know,
it's okay. It's a good bandwagon.
It's a good bandwagon. It's a great bandwagon. Speaking of, it's ironic that we use the phrase bandwagon. It was not intentional, but, you know, before I got sober, you know, I spent 10 years as an alcoholic, and a good chunk of that 10 years as a drug addict as well. And there was a time, and I remember this vividly. I was living in Colorado at the time. I flew back home to see my parents, and I went into the bathroom at my parents' house, and I got on the scale, and with clothes on, fully dressed, I weighed 155 pounds. And I'm a large dude. Like, I should not be, it was not healthy for me to weigh that much, or that little, really. And I agree, BMI is a dog shit number. I also think weight in general is a dog shit number when it comes to communicating health. I've often said to clients, that's like taking your tire pressure and trying to gauge whether or not your car is in good condition.
Take your tire pressure and figure out if you need any oil.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, so, all right. So the three of us are in agreement that, you know, like so many things, CrossFit is a little bit contrarian in how it approaches things. And one of those things is we have a broader definition for health than just BMI, for example, right? We care not, I don't care what you weigh, I care what you can do. It's your capacity. That's how we define fitness. Work capacity across broad time and modal domains is your fitness, and then throughout the years as you age, that's your health. So another one of the things, irrationally or irrationally, good or bad, I'm just here to be honest, that I feel is that sometimes that phrase, healthy at any size, is maligned and used in an attempt to justify or validate an unhealthy picture, right? It's one thing, for example, to say my body weight, my body fat, and my BMI fall within unhealthy values, but the way I live my life, I am exercising regularly, I'm trying to improve my sleep quality. I'm eating whole foods, right? So there's a disconnect there between the value that is defining health and what could be considered objectively healthy traits, right? I feel sometimes that is maligned, and there is the blanket validation of something or a condition that might be unhealthy without the associated objectively healthy traits, and done so in the name of blanket acceptance. Not to say that there's anything wrong with a blanket acceptance of some kind, but for me, it's like going back to the car analogy. If my tires are bald and my engine leaks oil and the brakes are kind of shoddy, but I said, but this is my car and that's it's perfect the way it is, right? I feel sometimes that there is that, the phrase that I want to use is harmful acceptance of what is an unhealthy condition or state for the sake of acceptance itself. And so that's a thing that I feel and a thing that I think. And so again, what comes to mind when I say something like that?
So a couple things. A lot of the kind of unspoken undertone of all of this is society expectations, like, you know, what is perceived as good, being like, you know, looking good in a bathing suit, maybe, you know, getting ready for beach season, having muscles, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. It's,
Sure.
you know, you either have to be, you know, have a small waist and, you know, look good in a bikini, or, you know, if you're a man, you should have a six pack, whatever it is that kind of society, you know, deems as good. I think that is kind of the undertone of all of this, right? So like the first thing that came to my mind when you were speaking is that you spoke about your struggle with addiction in the past. And I think that when people come out and they speak to their experiences with drug and alcohol addiction, there's so much sympathy and empathy from society as a whole, as far as like, wow, like look at what for example, like look at what you have done since, you know, those days when you were at your lowest. But I would argue, and I would assume, so I've never struggled with drug and alcohol addiction, but 100% I have struggled with food addiction. In my opinion, you know, not having experience with both, but I do believe that it stems from and is an incredibly similar thing. As far as, you know, I'm sure that there are different reasons why people turn to drugs and alcohol, but I think overall, if I were to blanket sweep, it's a matter of numbing, you know, whatever it is that you're struggling with, right? So in my experience, I was numbing a lot of my bad feelings by eating food. Whereas somebody who struggles with drugs and alcohol would numb their negative experience by turning to a drink or to, you know, whatever drug of choice.
I mean, I can tell you exactly where mine came from and give you an example.
Sure.
My drug and alcohol addiction was rooted in a complete and utter lack of self-worth. I had told myself that yeah, here's a great example. I remember when I got sober, I was working with a sponsor, and we were talking about the concept of heaven and hell, right? And my sponsor's like, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Yes." Do you believe there's a heaven and a hell? Yes. Do you believe you know which one you're going to? Yes. And I was convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that I had punched my ticket and was riding it to hell, right? And underneath that was this idea that I had written off and like who I was and what I had done and the sum total of my experiences had basically invalidated my existence and that I didn't have a reason to be around, right? So that's not, sorry to cut you off, but I didn't know if that, like, trying to make it more concrete.
Yeah. And I can confidently say that my addiction to food was stemmed from exactly the same thing, just a complete lack of self-worth.
Yeah.
I was raised by a woman who had her own struggles with her body image and, just something that a lot of people go through, right? And I think that now that I'm an adult, I can understand where my mother was coming from. But my mother taught me from a very young age that being fat is the worst thing that you can ever be as a human being. And that was only further enhanced by society and, what we're supposed to look like. And as I said earlier, like I've always been just a bigger woman, but nobody taught me as a kid that actually meant that I could be really strong or that I actually did have, this natural athletic ability. If I had been taught that my body was worth anything, but because I was taught from such a young age that my body was bad and wrong, I just further dove deeper into that, I think, because eating was the only thing that made me feel good.
Yeah.
And so I just kept eating. And it was, my mother enrolled me into Weight Watchers when I was 12 years old. And like looking back on that, it's like, I know 12-year-olds, like, oh my God, like that's a problem. So I just was taught and believed from a very, very young age that if I were smaller, if I were thinner, if I had a good BMI, if I had less body fat, I would be good.
Right.
In the eyes of everyone.
A moral value applied to a non-moral quantifier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck. Isn't it a weird mind fuck when you become an adult and you realize that nobody's got shit figured out and everybody is like still trying to undo the fucked up shit from high school. Yeah. And then it's like, then we have kids and like when I got sober and I actually started listening to my parents, I was like, oh, okay, they actually might know a thing or two, and then I had kids and I was like, oh shit. Kev, how you feeling over there?
I mean, dumbstruck. I'm blown away by both of your story. I mean, I've known Sam's story. Christina's like the first time I'm hearing kind of like more in depth your story. And I mean, I can confidently say that there's like absolutely no way that I can relate to. I mean, I just haven't gone through a struggle in that, avenue. I mean, we all have our struggles, but
sure,
I haven't struggled with an addiction to something aside, like unless you count playing sports as like an addiction, which I guess maybe, but like I just haven't struggled with something in that realm. And so like I can, as you're saying, Sam, like I can sympathize and like wrap my head around the idea of it and the things that you guys have gone through. But I can't imagine how that felt or, what you guys had to overcome to be the incredible human beings that I see before me right now. I mean, to think about what you guys have done and gone through to get where you are is absolutely astounding to me. and just makes me respect not that I didn't respect you before, I respect both of you immensely, but it just like adds to that. The more and more I hear about it, because I'm just like, wow, like holy shit, like you guys had to go through a lot to achieve what you have and be where you are today. So like as Sam said before, like I can sympathize, but I can in no way come even close to empathizing.
Well, first of all, that's sweet, and this is why we love you. And I'll speak for myself, but don't let me off the hook in the sense that like things that I've gone through versus things that I'm going through. So if I've learned anything, it's that it doesn't matter who you are or what you're going through. Everything is only ever one day at a time. And I think you bring up maybe this is just how I feel. Kev, I think your perspective here is the most important perspective in this group because I think Kevin represents the avatar for so many CrossFit coaches. Yeah. People who can sympathize but not empathize because they are intelligent individuals. They understand exercise science. But by virtue of circumstances in life, they've never personally experienced something like drug addiction or alcoholism or something like, struggles with weight and obesity. And in that way, there's a wide spectrum of people who become CrossFit coaches. But I would not be surprised to find out that a double-digit percentage of that community has a story similar to Kevin's, right? And so when we talk about things like this, they would have a response similar to Kevin's. And this is where the real blessing of having you here to discuss this, Cristina, is that it's not just Cristina who had her journey as a person who struggled with food addiction and, body image and now is working to overcome that. You're a coach and it's not like you got your level 1 yesterday. You're a high level coach. And I think that you are in position to help us and other coaches. Like, how do you reframe your own experiences? And first of all, do you have issues reframing your own experiences and then still doing what you do professionally? And then second, how do your experiences inform how you walk through your professional responsibilities and work with clients who have similar experiences that you do?
Yeah, I mean, and that, like, I think that's why I do what I do, right? I have found the reason why I went through what I went through, because there was like a lot of pain there, like a lot of pain, where there were times where I don't even know that I would be sitting in this room alive right now because that's how dark it got. And so I now have a reason why I went through all that so that I can come forward and help to educate, that seems like a weird word, but like to help bring awareness to, for coaches like Kevin who do care.
Coaches like me too, let's be honest.
And you too. Yeah. And you too, who do care very deeply, but cannot relate. And I think it's just really important that all coaches, regardless of your background, have more awareness here because, as we said earlier, CrossFit is right on the money. The biggest problem facing the world is these chronic diseases that stem a majority from obesity, and it's a really big problem in the world. So how do we get coaches to understand that more so that we can continue to battle it? So I think that Yes, like I struggle because I was raised to think that health looks a certain way, and I still deep down believe that. Even though I don't believe that, I believe that deep down.
Yeah.
So, I recently accepted a job where I had to replace a gentleman who, chose to move on in his fitness endeavors, but was, arguably the specimen of health and fitness. If you if you've ever seen a picture of this gentleman, 8 to 10 abs are rippling at all times. Biceps the size of his own head, and just like an absolutely wonderful gentleman as well. But like
Yes.
when you say to yourself in your head, CrossFit coach, this guy's picture pops up.
Okay.
And so I was, well, you as in the general you, but
Yes.
when I took this job, there was a lot of insecurity in the sense of like, are these people going to think that I can even coach them? Just because of my own core belief of what a coach looks like. And so it's definitely a struggle. But it's what has caused me to have that drive to become the absolute best. So I had this conversation recently with Denise Thomas where, and you have said the same thing to me, Sam. She's a very small woman. Anybody who knows Denise, she is petite, very petite. And she looked at me and she was like, do you think that I look like I could go to the CrossFit Games? And it's like, and I do, because I was taught to believe that small is the best. Like you should just always be small. So like, yeah, I think that she's absolutely perfect. But she's looking at me and saying, I'm not as strong as some of the bigger women, or, whatever it is, whatever her own beliefs about her body are.
Right.
But that I needed to make it my goal that as soon as I open my mouth, there's no question.
Right.
Everybody knows that I know what I'm talking about, and that I am going to lead them towards a life of health and fitness.
Sure.
That's our job as coaches, is to, encourage and bring people along the journey to find, health and fitness. And so, that's where that kind of comes from. Just like my drive to just equip myself with as much knowledge as possible so that I can, handle anything that comes my way. But it's, there's nothing that can kind of change that societal, expectation of, what is good, going back to that like moral dilemma, aside from just kind of allowing and accepting myself to exist in my body the way that it is, which I guess goes back to your, health at any size comment. I'm really big on, this is my body.
Yes.
I do my best to take care of it. I do a workout a day. I eat relatively healthy. I also very much enjoy ice cream. And that's okay. And that's healthy.
Right.
So that's, I think by teaching more people that, I think we make a bigger difference. Because I think that when we say this picture is fitness, and you need to get there, that's where a lot of people start on that journey. They go really intense, like very quickly, and then they burn out.
Sure.
And then they end up just going way down in the other direction, which was my experience after I first started CrossFit.
Yeah, there's so I work with an organization called Fitfiliate, and one of the things that we talk about is measuring efforts and not outcomes. And we look at it from the perspective of business health, right? And also for individuals who are business owners or head coaches, like, what are you doing day to day to move yourself in the right direction? Even if the metrics that you've identified as the thing that you want to focus on are not where you want them to be yet, right? So we have just spent 49 minutes, and there was a little bit of banter back and forth. So let's call it 39 minutes exploring the very complex issue that is, how do we define healthy, right? How is healthy defined both inside and outside of CrossFit? How then, and you don't have to answer this question. If you're not comfortable answering it, please just say so. So then you have quantified for you like a mechanism for acceptance, is like a healthy, what I would consider an emotionally and spiritually healthy mechanism for acceptance, right? You can say, these are the things I'm doing to move me in a healthy direction emotionally. These are the things I'm doing to move me in a healthy direction physically. And the complex and nuanced and balanced sum of all of that is, this is my healthy lifestyle, right? And in doing that, and a core part of that is this acceptance of ourselves, of us as we are, and not in the comparing of, what we talk about in AA is, I'm not comparing how I feel on the inside to what I see someone else exhibiting on the outside, because that's always a recipe for finding yourself lacking. Mm-hmm. And so with that framework for how you are viewing your own journey, can you help other coaches understand, like, what are, for example, your goals? What are some things that you are working on? Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where that question ends. Like, help me understand what's important to you as you continue, not only, I mean, you've talked about it as a coach, but now as a person who is living and breathing the CrossFit methodology as well.
Yeah, I mean, so for myself individually, I had to realize, like, I had to ask myself that question, right? Like, what is my goal?
Yeah.
Now, if my goal was, I want to look like, I don't know, Tia Claire Toomey, let's just use an example. I want to look like Tia Claire Toomey.
Who is like so pregnant and crazy slaying workouts, by the way.
I know. I know. Yeah. But like, I'm saying, she has visible abs. Mm-hmm. She has muscular arms. Like, she is incredible. Like, a picture of fitness. She is the fittest woman in the world, even still.
She's the fittest person. She's got the most wins, period.
She wins. That's true. She's the fittest person. If that were my goal, I now have to look at, what is the lifestyle that I need to live in order to achieve that goal? Now, for me, that is not a healthy lifestyle. For me. I'm not saying, because I think that Tia has got it figured it out, and she is crushing it, and I think she loves life and is living it up, and she's like still competitive, even though she's like 10 months pregnant.
Yeah.
But for me, if I were to live the lifestyle that is required to be on that end of the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum, it is not healthy for me to do so. Okay. The same way that it would not probably be healthy for you, Sam, to be a bartender.
That'd be a bad idea.
So, right? So yeah. It's like, it's just, that is not my goal because of my own personal struggles. Now, I think that that's the same way that I approach everything with any one of my members or clients. So if somebody were to come to me and say, I just want to stop hating myself, for one example, because there's a lot of people who have that feeling.
Yeah.
well, then how about you start coming to the gym 3 times a week?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we preach this too all the time. Like, you know, even CrossFit preaches this, like, you know, keeping things scaling within, you know, psychological capacities is a factor just as much as physical capacities. So like
Yes.
somebody brand new to the gym, let's start with 2 or 3 days a week of low intensity, minimal volume, just like start moving the body. And then we'll build up from there. I think that it's when we stop preaching about the journey and only talk about the result. I think that a lot of times, you know, CrossFit will put these like super inspirational videos out there, which are incredible, but they'll show somebody in the before and then the after. And sure, they talk about what the journey was like, but they have, in the eyes of the person who's struggling, they have arrived.
Right.
And so that person who's struggling still just can't quite, like, they want that. They want to be healthy and they want to, you know, be the poster child for the success of CrossFit and what it can do to change people's lives. But nobody is displaying the journey to get there, the struggles, the hard part, the, you know, the not being able to step up onto a 45-pound plate in the beginning, you know, like actually seeing all of that along the way. And then I think that the other piece that I kind of struggle with is that a lot of people in the fitness industry will make comments along the lines of, you know, oh, well, that person isn't healthy though. But like we don't owe our health to anybody except for ourselves. And so I think that what I mean by that is like I can give an example. There was an ad recently, I guess Gatorade came out with this new like formula that's like, I don't know, 10 calories or something like that.
Okay.
And the picture in the ad was a larger woman performing yoga.
Okay.
And a bunch of people in the comments were like, she isn't healthy.
Mm.
She isn't healthy. But like this, and then they were like, and Gatorade isn't healthy either. And it's like, okay, like side note, like that would be a side discussion, whether
Right.
Gatorade is healthy. But like, why does that woman need to be healthy for you?
Right.
Like, who cares?
Right.
Why can't that woman just exist?
Right.
Healthy or not? She's just a woman doing yoga, right? Like, that's it. But for some reason, we all get on this high horse of like, oh, well, but you know, she's doing yoga, that's great, but she's not healthy. So
well, and I think that's furthered by what is popularly known as the Mike Krahulik internet dickwad theory. Have you ever heard of this?
No, but
I like it.
So Mike Krahulik, for my fellow computer geeks out there, is the artist from Penny Arcade. It's one of the longest running webcomics in the internet history. And he has this theory that you could take a regular human being and they might be fine. They might be a regular, nice person. But if you then give that person anonymity and access to more information than their brain is prepared for, it removes the inhibitions and they end up being that person who spouts off. It's commonly trolls, right? And so I'm not surprised at all, tragically, that that is a thing that exists. People making comments like that. And I think that's a really good question to ask both ourselves as trainers and humans, individuals. Like, is your side of the street clean before you worry about, you know, yelling across at your neighbor? And is that really necessary? Right? The answer is almost always no. At least that's my opinion. I do want to be conscious of time because you are busy. And we have 100% chance that we will ramble and go very, very long. Anything else that's in your head around this topic, like burning desire, something you want to make sure is heard? Because this is a big, complex issue, and we'll probably have to do this again.
Yeah. Feel like there was, but we got on so many tangents that I was like, oh, this.
Welcome to the party.
That's how we do.
I think that the if I were to give like an overarching, like the most important part, like from my perspective, for people to understand, is that like moral piece, right? Like we can't, as coaches, we have a responsibility to try our hardest to not place judgment on the people who come to us. And it's so hard. And like, regardless of, like, even I struggle with that. Like, I am not immune to judging people just because I have been judged. It's a huge amount of work on yourself to be able to face somebody who's coming to you and try to treat them as this like blank slate without any of your own personal input. And so I think it's just like, I think Kevin pointed out either, this, while he can't relate to either one of us, some of our stories, he can relate with the fact that like we all struggle. So the more that we accept that and understand that, and not like rate our struggles as better or worse than another, right? Because my original point, when we were talking about the, alcohol addiction versus food addiction point, from where I'm sitting, alcohol addiction is much more accepted than food addiction. Now,
I would agree.
So, I mean, yes, and I wouldn't want to like offend you in that statement, but it's what it seems, right? Even to the point of like, I've been in my coach development group that I participate in, and we've had discussions about having parties at the gym and how we need to regulate the kinds of foods that athletes are bringing to the gym, and like we shouldn't be allowing them to bring sugar, and we shouldn't be allowing them to bring chicken nuggets or whatever it may be, but there's no question about them bringing alcohol.
Oh yeah.
No question.
Oh yeah.
And most gyms that I have been a part of, there is a secret fridge in the back that is absolutely full of beer.
The gyms I've been a part of, it's not secret.
I was going to say, like, it's the fridge. There's one fridge and there's beer in the fridge.
There's one fridge with water in the top and beer in the bottom, and so that's it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's my plea is like, I've been the woman who goes through the drive-thru and hides in my car because eating McDonald's is quite literally the most embarrassing thing a human being could do. But if I were to go out and buy myself a 6-pack and drink it, people would be like, oh, hell yeah, you had a great night. Right? So I think that's just one example. But I think that like as coaches, the less we place judgment on BMI, body fat percentage, whatever it may be, the more people that we can help.
Right. I think that's wonderfully summed. Kevin, talk at me. Talk to me now.
Just I mean, I guess just like final last thoughts, just going along with kind of how Cristina was talking about people on the internet. Just don't be a dick. It costs you exactly 0% energy to not be a dick.
Yeah.
It takes actual effort to get yourself riled up to the point where like you're willing to comment or post some bullshit thought in your head that is, whether right, wrong, indifferent, it doesn't matter. Don't be a dick. It's fine. that's my last thing. Because I hate that on the internet. Like, you see someone post something and that might be one of two things. Either like it might be something amazing for them. Let's just say, they do a power clean. And they're like, PR power clean, so excited. And there's two types of comments that you might see. One being like, well, your setup or your form was trash, so maybe like not being a piece of shit. Or that's cool. You power clean 100 pounds, mine's 225. Like just something like that. It's like invalidating the fact that person worked really hard for that. Don't do that. Don't be a dick. Like you deserve a dick punch for that. I have zero tolerance for that kind of stuff. So if I had to leave people with one thing is to, even if you can't empathize with people, be sympathetic about where they are in their journey, and everyone's journey is different and looks different. So don't be a dick.
Yeah. Don't be a dick and you won't earn a punch in the dick.
Yeah, exactly. Tagline for a talking average fan. Don't be a dick. Have a virtuous hollow position.
I really appreciate you taking the time, considerable amount of time to come and talk about the issue. Again, I basically sandbagged both of them and said, hey, we're talking about this. And it was my effort to exercise my own mental demons. So I appreciate you coming along for the ride. I appreciate your input and your willingness to be vulnerable and open and honest about this. I think this kind of, if we want to talk about solving the world's most vexing problem, we are going to need, by the way, if you are a CrossFit coach and you haven't done the math on it, you should go to the CDC website and look up the number of deaths attributed to coronary artery disease, for example. Take that number and divide that number by 150. That's the number of affiliates we need in America, more than we have right now. Assume that you're going to need somewhere between 1 and 4 coaches for each one of those affiliates. So take that number that you divided by 150, assuming each gym can service 150 members optimally, multiply it by 4. Now you end up with a number north of 100,000. It's the number of coaches that we need to actually make a dent in this world's most vexing problem. It's a tremendously huge number. We need more coaches. We don't need fewer coaches. And we need coaches who understand and can be sympathetic to the complex journeys that people are going to come into the box with. And we need more people willing to discuss that so that we have more coaches who can learn about that. So thank you for taking the time to come and do so. I really appreciate it. Kevin, thank you for being
here.
Open. Well, no, but like it's not easy to sit on the other side of a conversation like this. Like it's not a very emotionally loaded conversation. Mm-hmm. And then to also carry into it an honesty and vulnerability of like, I have no fucking clue what you're talking about, but I'm here for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the first step is you have to know what you don't know. If I were to sit here and be like, I 100% understand what you guys are doing. That's not the case. I've lived the most boring life, and still do up to this point. I have not a clue what you guys have been through. So if I were to sit here and be like, 100% understand, I know the answer to the problem. That's not the way to do it. You have to. It starts with like knowing what you don't know and coming from like, I only have things to learn.
Yeah.
So that's
beautiful.
It. If you can start from there, you're at least a little baby step on the path to being better.
Absolutely. Well, that's where we'll sum up for today. If you've been playing along at home, thank you for riding the bus with us. Cristina, we're definitely going to have you come back on because it's just way too much fun.
Yeah.
And
this is great.
Yeah. And everybody who was here, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.